Hello everyone, I hope you all had a very nice Christmas break and had fun playing the demo. It's been really nice to read everyone's messages, so thanks very much for that, and also thanks everyone who uploaded some gameplay of them playing the demo. It's been very useful for me to watch and just to see how other people are playing and reacting to what's going on in the game. In this video I'm going to go through a few aspects of the demo which I'd appreciate everyone's feedback on, and at the end I'd also just let you know what my plans for 2024 are. Before we start though, I just want to tell you that I have 2 additional downloads for you to play. The first one is this demo which is pretty much the one I used for the CRT video, just maybe another day's worth of updates. And I include this, first of all, to give you an idea of kind of the progress that was made in the final few days, but most importantly because this one seemed to be unaffected by that room change bug that I mentioned before. Even in the areas, for example, the last few areas of the entrance level, even though they will have enemies in them, that bug doesn't really take place. I've tried it like 5 times on my Japanese console and it was all fine. So just as a bit of like history for you, just if you want to play through that, you can. There is one very major bug with this one though that I fixed in later editions in the Christmas ROM, and that is if you hold down while pressing jump, then you won't be able to jump again until you crouch. So that was a very annoying bug which I was very glad I was able to fix, but please just have a little play if you want and have the time and have fun with it. The second ROM is this 320 resolution version of the stable Christmas ROM that I released. So I haven't really made any changes apart from changing the resolution, so it's going to look pretty trippy because in doing different resolutions for the game you have to also change the camera code and alter some of the level graphics and do lots of other stuff too, the enemy code. So what I've done here is basically just change the resolution, leave everything else the same, so it looks a bit glitchy, but I think it might be fun to play through. I personally very like the extra resolution. I think it looks very crisp, and so I think this would eventually be my favourite way to play the game, of course once I've changed the code as well. And I hope to have the same ROM with a selection where you can choose which resolution you want. And for me personally, I think I like the 320 mode, but just to show you here, just to show you how it works, and I've just included this little ROM here, so feel free to have a little play of this one too. Okay, now let's move on to an analysis of the demo. There are many things which could be explained away with, we didn't have enough time, these are just placeholders that will be fixed later. For example, the second half of the marble gallery, most of the background graphics here are just placeholders until Parent does the proper ones, and then we've got some AIs which I haven't really done fully. I just put them in the game just to show you what the sprite looks like. And there are many other examples too. For example, some enemies having missing death animations. So rather, it would make a pretty boring video if I just played through and said, okay, this will be replaced, this will be replaced when we have time. Instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is to focus on the design elements of the demo. So these were deliberate design decisions on my parts, and I'll explain why I chose to do them. And I'd like to hear your opinions on whether you think the good aspects and bad aspects of these ones. So let's start. First of all, we have the level 1 boss, and just before we go into the boss we have this little area here. Now when it comes to these kind of 16-bit action games like Bloodlines or Shinobi or any of them, they're often games that you play over again and again. I know I have, and I think it's good to reward the player for playing like a second or third time. So when you play this game for the first time, you're likely just to walk across and fall down straight away, but of course when you play it the second time you know what's coming and you can jump across instead and claim the 1 life up. So I think that's a little reward for the player for playing a second time. Of course in the original Symphony of the Night there is no boss in the entrance part, so I had to think one up, and I chose this tribute to the Bloodlines first level boss, or I should say the sub boss of the first level. I always thought that the wolf, and especially the version with this rider here, is such a cool character. It's a bit of a waste to have him just as a regular enemy, especially one at the beginning where you just kill it with one little pop to the nose. Because of that, I was glad to give it a second chance here, and you can see that the attack patterns are pretty simple because it's a first level boss after all. So you have this dash forward. I think that has like a 3 in 4 chance of happening, and then a 1 in 4 chance of happening is this little walk forward and back here, just to spice things up a bit. And of course if you hit them a certain number of times it goes into the second phase, and of course we need the animation of the rider falling off the wolf for that. At the moment it just switches the sprite straight away. And just like with Bloodlines, the wolf has a howl. I think we can probably make that more high pitched in a future version. And the window shatter. Now I would like to add more glass, more shattering to make it a bit more dramatic, because Bloodlines has that too. But as a concept I think it works quite well. I wasn't actually going to make the fireballs, whether they go in straight ahead or downwards or upwards a bit and randomized, but I thought for a first level boss it's best to keep it a bit predictable. So the first one just goes straight, the second goes down a bit so you can't duck it, and the third one goes up a bit. The graphics for the boss sprite, by the way, is one that I did, and it doesn't look too bad, but hopefully at some point in the future Pyron will replace it with something no doubtly a lot better. Feel free to let me know what you think of the first level boss in the comments below, but now let's move on to the alchemy lab. I did actually have the green Axeman in the previous year's demo, but as anyone who played it knows, the AI in that demo is very rudimentary to say the least. This one's much more advanced and much more aggressive. So what he does, he throws 3 axes in quick succession. Each axe throw has a 50-50 chance of being a high or a low throw, so you have to keep on your toes. You can hit the axes with your sword, although of course we have to put in the little fire animation to see when it's destroyed. He'll also keep on backing up if you get closer to him, because he doesn't have a melee attack, he just has a ranged attack, so I think that increases the challenge too. In the original, I think maybe he's a bit too relaxed. He throws his axes, it takes him a bit of a while to throw the axe, so when he does, the axe moves quite slow, and I think it's a lot easier to fight him here, and a lot of complaints people have about the original Symphony of Night is a bit too easy, especially, I don't think it matters so much for a Metroidvania type game, but for a linear Castlevania game, we definitely have to up the difficulty a little bit. I noticed a few people mention about my version that it's sometimes difficult to know whether a strike has registered or not. Now my version, it does have a sound effect when you hit, for example, the Axeman here. However, unlike the original, it doesn't have a palette change when you hit him, so the Axeman won't turn red like he does in the PlayStation version. The reason I was able to do the palette change on some of the bosses, for example Death, but not on the regular enemies, is because the regular enemies, they'll use the same palette, and sometimes there's more than one of them on screen at the same time. So if I were to change the palette to red to register a hit, it would affect all the enemies of that type using that palette on the screen, so it get a bit confusing. I think it's just a limitation of the hardware. What I could add to my version, however, is the when you strike the enemy in the original, there's a little sprite that comes up to show that you've hit him. So I can add that, so I think that'd be a good thing to add later, and of course eventually I want to add the neat fire death animation too. Although I did buff the Axeman in my version, it's still nowhere near as aggressive as the one in Rondo of Blood. This appears in the second level too, not including the prologue, and even using Maria, who's kind of the game's easy mode, it's still quite difficult to beat him. He's kind of like almost like a mini boss. I had a lot of fun watching James and Mike play Rondo of Blood on their playthrough, and here there's another version of it that's even more difficult. So he really corners you, and he's got a shield, and he's got this aggressive melee attack, and you can see the expression on their faces, the kind of difficulty they have beating this guy, and I know because I had the exact same experience too. I think that I've said before that I want to pitch the difficulty. It may be a little bit more difficult than Castlevania Bloodlines, but easier than Rondo of Blood. And this kind of stage design kind of emphasizes some of the parts of Rondo of Blood, which I think are a little bit too unfair to the player. It's still a fun game, but this is definitely a bit over the top in my opinion. In later levels of the game, I do plan to use this blue version of the sprite just to create an enemy that's very similar to the Rondo of Blood Axeman, but not quite as tough. I'd be interested to know what everyone thinks of this particular section. For the bones that drop the spit, I've made it so that they don't drop poison anymore because it doesn't make much sense in the context of a linear Castlevania game. And to be honest, even in the original, when you got poisoned, I normally just wait for it to wear off if I didn't have the particular antidote. So I thought that was kind of a pretty pointless thing anyway. In this first half, so long as you're patient, then I think it's pretty easy to get through. You can destroy the spitting bones one by one and collect some hearts. And when it comes to the Axeman at the top, like all the Axemen in the game, he will back off when Alucard gets close, so you will have a chance to jump on the platform, but he's going to start attacking you straight away, so that's a bit of a challenge. Now, the bit at the bottoms may be a bit more controversial. Actually, before I swapped out, I had the swordman in here. I actually had 2 Axemen throwing axes, but then sometimes you would have to drop down with 6 axes flying, and that was way too crazy. So I replaced it with one of these swordmen, and you can see that the actual collision with that swordman is a little bit bugged out. When he hits you from the left hand side, you actually fall to the left rather than get shoved to the right, which is wrong. It's just something I need to change in that code. I think maybe for that first bit I might have put 2 of the swordsmen in there, And then in the second bit, when you drop down here, this would have one axeman and one swordsman to up the ante a bit and up the difficulty. The creature sub-boss was unchanged from when I did the video on him, but I looked at people's suggestions and there's some really good ideas there. One of them was from one of our musicians, Aliana, and he suggested that maybe the lower on health the boss gets, the quicker his roll is, which makes it more difficult to avoid and also more difficult to get a few hits on him, so I think that's a good idea. Second idea, which I think a few people had, was if the hammer hits the ground, because that's still quite a kind of a close range attack, it could also make it so that maybe the ground shakes and maybe a brick or two falls from the ceiling, which could hit Alucard, so I think that's another good idea. So at some point in the future, I'll probably add those two little attack changes too. These spikes were a last minute addition and I want to use them in other parts of the castle too, so I think it adds a bit more kind of platforming risk, which is suitable for a linear Castlevania. Unlike something like Super Castlevania, I won't make it one hit death because I think that's a bit too unfair, especially in an early level like this. But in addition to this particular room here, I want to have the spikes and also want to have the bones that drop to spit rotating around that central platform, because I think having the bits of spit drop down as well as the spikes will be a nice challenge. Maybe have like 4 of them rotating around the middle bit there rather than having the axemen there. In the original Alchemy Lab boss fight, when you're fighting Slogger and Gaibon's kind of like that friend who wants to help you out but ends up making a mess of things. So you can see here that you can pretty much just turn around. He always drops him next to you, which is a pretty stupid thing to do. You should either drop him right on top of you where Slogger can hit you with his spear, or maybe he can drop you much further to the left or right, so at least Slogger's out of harm's way, but he's trying to help his bro here, but he's not doing a very good job of it. So I definitely want to change that. In my version, I wanted to have the spear drop only once at the very beginning because it's a bit of an iconic attack, and then after that have some different attack patterns. In my version, Slogger has 2 attacks. He has the basic spear thrust attack, which is he actually moves a bit. He doesn't just thrust the spear, he'll move forward a bit, which makes it a bit more dangerous. And if you get further away, he also has like a fireball attack too. And in the meantime, Gaibon, he'll try and keep out of harm's way. He'll only do the spear drop once, and then he'll just spend the time either doing a diagonal fire attack, or he'll drop down and he'll do like a horizontal fire attack. Sometimes he'll do it behind you, sometimes in front of you. Another difference in my version is Gaibon, he doesn't turn into the red version, the angry version, once he gets to a certain amount of health. He does that once his friend Slogger is defeated. So when you defeat Slogger, that's when he'll become the angry, more dangerous version. I thought that would be a nice little touch because he's very upset about his friend getting killed. I think it gives the characters a little bit more personality. My angry version of Gaibon has 2 attacks. He has the attack you just saw where he does like a spread of fireballs from the air, and another attack when he drops down and does the horizontal fireballs. But unlike the PlayStation version, these horizontal fireballs, they can hurt you even if you duck, so you have to jump over them, which I thought added a little bit of extra challenge too. I hope that everyone was happy to see Savage Regime's name turn up in the credits there and to hear the music fire up as you enter the Marble Gallery. And he actually contacted me a couple of weeks before Christmas, but rather than announce it, I thought it'd be a nice surprise just to save it for the demo. For these little flea men, I wanted to make it so they're about the same level of aggression as the PlayStation original, and I think they pretty much are. Let me know if you had any problems with these guys. They do have a little bug where sometimes they go through the ceiling, but that's a simple collision thing that I have to fix later. The Fleamen make a return in this section, but this time they're more like in Rondo of Blood where they slide down the banisters, and anyone who's played that game will recognise their behaviour here. So I quite like that game, so I want to include some of the gameplay mechanics from there too. And after them you have to face the Axemen, so it's a bit more of a challenge because it's on a platform, there's some tight jumping there, but the Axemen, they will back off, so that makes it a bit easier. If they went right to the edge and kept at the edge, then that'll make it very frustrating, but I hope no one had any problems with this section. Let me know if you had any problems with the marionette enemies. The pathfinding on them is pretty simple, but then again it seemed very simple in the PlayStation original too. Let me know if they kind of float through any walls or anything, but I think they seem to be working okay from my testing. I gave them 8 hit points, so you have to hit them with the sword 4 times or the sub-weapon 8 times. Now I think you had to maybe strike them 4 times in the original game too. Regarding these sub-weapons in general, I get the feeling that people think they're a bit too weak, so maybe I should make it so each sub-weapon does the same amount of damage as a sword hit. So let me know what you think about that, or I could have it so that different enemies are affected by different sub-weapons in different ways, so some of them are particularly vulnerable to certain sub-weapons. That'll be pretty easy to program in, so let me know your ideas on that topic, please. This is one of those basic Castlevania Symphony of the Night corridors, but I thought I'd spice up a bit. Rather than just having the Fleamen as in the original, I did a couple of X-Men here too. And I think the combination of these make it a bit more of a challenge. You have to be especially careful with this X-Man. If he keeps backing off, you're going to end up facing another X-Man and another potentially 2 Fleamen. So I think that's a nice little challenge. If you've played it once before, then you know that you have to kill him very quickly, otherwise might be in a bit of trouble. Veterans of Symphony of the Night may recognise these little contraptions of death from the reverse castle. I decided to move them here in order to turn what would have been a boring couple of corridors into something a bit more interesting. I did add some spikes to the top of these just to emphasise that you can't jump on top of them unlike the original, just to make it a bit more difficult, and I hope that's clear from the graphics. Once you land on this middle section here, the ghost will start spawning, and I like to hear people's opinion on this. What you think of their AI. Do you think it's too easy or too difficult? I personally think that the movement's okay, but maybe the respawn rate is a bit too quick. I think after you kill them, maybe you should give the player a bit more breathing time and not make them come back straight away. And so you got the first bit with the spikes only, the second bit with the ghosts only, and the third part of this corridor with the ghosts and the spikes. So I just wanted to gradually edge up the difficulty as you go through the room. In this part here, I think maybe the ghosts take a bit too long to spawn, so you can probably just about make it through if you're very quick to the end. But then if you wait, you suddenly get a lot of them, so I think I should make them spawn a lot quicker when you first enter the room in this one. There are more moving spikes in this room, but this time in the middle instead of the ghost, you have the Bomber Knight. I like to hear everyone's opinion of the Bomber Knight, whether you think he's too easy or too hard. I think his number of hit points are okay. I think I gave him 20, so you have to hit him with the sword I think 10 times. I think the problem here is maybe he can only throw one bomb at a time, then he has to wait until that bomb either explodes or it hits Alucard or Alucard destroys the bomb before he can throw another one. And I think maybe that's a bit too slow. I can make him a bit more aggressive. Maybe he can throw 2 at any one time. And I think I might like to change it so when he dies, maybe he throws up 4 bombs at the same time, just on a suicide mission, just to see if he can get rid of Alucard. But let me know what you think, whether you think he's just right or whether you think I should make him a bit more hard. There's not too much to say about Medusa here. She was another late last minute addition, and one of the reasons I didn't put the music to this section is I want to emphasize that this is very much a work in progress, unlike some of the other bosses which are actually quite complete. As well as her basic sword attack, which only works when she's facing to the left, by the way, not to the right. The hitbox to the right I haven't done yet. I also gave her this Medusa head kind of attack, which I thought was quite neat, a neat idea. I might change the velocity and the pattern and maybe add more Medusa heads, a real bunch of them. It might be quite interesting to do that. Of course, I will add her turning Alucard to stone attack a bit later, but I simply didn't have time to include that in this demo, unfortunately. For the 4th and final level of the demo, I think this first part of the outer wall might have been a bit confusing to people who didn't see the video on it a few weeks back. Just to fill in those who missed it, this first section is going to be actually a split room, so you can have 2 routes. That's where you start in the middle. At the top here is going to be a door to a room, which is what the next one in the demo is going to be. Or it's going to have the elevator mechanism at the top with the switch, so you're going to have to hit the switch. If you want to go to the bottom, more difficult route, you hit the switch, then you go all around to the bottom, you defeat the Armor Lord, and then eventually there'll be a little lift elevator to take you down to the second route, the lower route. I get the feeling that a certain section of this room 2 here might be a bit controversial in terms of level design. So the first part's okay, they won't shoot you until you drop down, so that's fine I think. These 2 here are easy to deal with, and you've got the barrel skeleton enemy, which isn't too hard to deal with either. But I think the difficult part is the one at the top. So you got an Armor Lord in front, and then behind him you got a musketman taking like cheap shots at you. Now, if you have the axe, if you've played this before, then you probably know to keep the axe in this section. So you have that foreknowledge, and you get rewarded by this one being a lot easier. This part, so you can hit the musketman even from below by using the axe, and you can also attack the Armor Lord below using the axe as well. So the second time you play this, you'll definitely know to keep the axe for this section. Now, if you don't have the axe like I don't here and just have the holy water, then this little part becomes maybe a little frustrating. In my defense, I've programmed it so that the musket man, he can't shoot you from off screen, so you'll definitely be able to see him before he shoots you, because nothing's more frustrating than getting hit by some kind of projectile that you can't see from off screen. But of course it does become very difficult without the axe, so if people think this is cheap, I understand, and I might change this part, so let me know what you think of this one. You must admit though that it's very satisfying to finally kill the musket man after he's been taking his cheap shots at you, after finally defeating the armor lord. And you have some enemies in Symphony of the Night which can run away. There's at least one or two of these enemies, and it'd be nice if this musket man could run away once you defeat the armor lord and you chase him down and kill him. I think that might require some new animations, so it might be a bit out of scope of this project, but it's a neat idea nonetheless. Since we've got the armor lord here, I just want to say that at the moment in the code, the amount of damage you're done by each enemy and each attack is the same for everyone, but in the future maybe it might make more sense if, for example, the big sword swing of the armor lord would do more damage to you than, say, accidentally bumping into some kind of skeleton or zombie enemy. So let me know what you think of that. I think it might be good in the future to vary the amount of damage done depending on the attack and who's delivering the attack. The outer wall in the original game is a pretty small area, so it's a bit of a challenge to turn it into a proper level, and in order to help with this I created this little rooftop area here. Now the reason I'm jumping up and down here is because before I had a little collision bug sometimes, but I don't know when it happens or when it doesn't. Now it seems to be working fine. Sometimes whenever you try to reproduce a bug, you want to reproduce it, it doesn't work, and then when you want to play normally, the bug suddenly turns up, so that's rather annoying. A main inspiration for the rooftop area was some bugs actually appeared in the original game, some glitches where you could go through the wall and go outside the castle. Now once you did that, of course the level collision didn't work properly, it was all messed up, but I thought it gave me the idea, the inspiration. I think the end result is pretty good. Here we have another respawning enemy in the form of these flying skeletons here. Unlike the ghosts we had in the marble gallery, I think maybe these guys they take a bit too long to respawn, but let me know what you think of these. A little bit further along you're going to have more musket men too, and I've programmed it so that the musket men they don't come too close to the edge, so you'd always have some space to jump into even if you don't have the knife or the axe to kill them from afar. And as I said before, they won't actually attack you until they're on screen, so you'll never get hit by them without knowing what you've been hit by. And I think the jump itself is not a pixel perfect jump, it's quite an easy jump to make. Maybe I'll change it so that the second jump in this section is actually more difficult, is another tower cross, just to add to the challenge, but let me know what you think. Having all these slopes on the rooftops also makes it an ideal area for these barrel skeletons, because it means that their projectiles kind of bounces down. I might add a second attack to these guys, because once they throw the barrel, they're kind of out of the game. I might make it so they can also start throwing some regular bones at you after they throw the barrel. In the final version, if you happen to fall off the rooftops into between any of the gaps, you will die, it will be an insta-death. I just haven't had the time to program that into the demo yet. I personally really like this area, it's something that's different from the original, and apart from the really relaxing music that Engelbart created for it, I also really like this background that Pyron did with the moon in the clouds, and you notice I like it, so I use it quite a lot in different areas of the game. Before we take a look at the final boss of the demo, let's first take a look at his rather pitiful PlayStation incarnation. So you can see here that I can pretty much stun lock him the entire game through. Now I'm not particularly powerful at this point, I'm not the type of person who likes to grind, it's just that this boss is so weak that you can just hit him straight away and then just keep him trapped in the corner here, just keep stun locking, and eventually he's going to die in no time. Even if I take a very passive approach and keep my distance, you can see that the attacks are actually not very effective. So you have the first one with the electricity, but the angle of the spread is such that it's very easy to avoid. So long as you're not jumping to the side, you're not going to get hit by it. And then you've got this bird one here, which is not an attack, it's just the boss just taking back energy, I think, getting more powerful again, but it just gives you plenty of chances to hit them if you want, but I'm being very nice to him here. You have this one where he moves to the side and shoots out the birds, but again, that's very easy to avoid. You can see it coming, you can just move to the side, and the only really difficult one is this electricity one here where he fires these balls, but a lot of them, the hitboxes seem a bit weird. It seems quite easy to, sometimes they don't seem to connect with you, so overall the attack patterns, they look very cool, but I don't think they're very effective. So even if you do give the enemy a chance to attack you, the attacks aren't very effective. So I definitely wanted to keep the cool attack patterns, but also give the boss a bit more of a chance to really spread his wings, so to speak. For this section, when the boss lands on the ground in my version and the birds come towards him, I made it so this was actually an attack, not just the boss recharging, because I think the recharging is a bit pointless. Now this electricity attack is definitely a lot more difficult. The balls they move fast and they stay on the screen for a longer time. They come around for a second round and it's quite difficult to avoid, but you can avoid it as I'll show you shortly here. And you can see that the angle of this feather attack here is much more tight than in the original, so you really have to get underneath him if you want to avoid that attack. Now this bird attack is actually quite easy to avoid once you know the pattern, and you can even get some shots on the boss while doing it if you're skilled enough. I think that overall each attack pattern has enough animation to give you warning of what's coming next, so it makes it a bit more easier to avoid. And you can see there I finally avoided one of the electric balls. Now I used to be really good at this boss fight when I was programming it a couple of months ago because I was playing it over and over again, but now I've lost the rhythm a bit of avoiding these ball attacks here. So this was the first time I'd played it in about 4 weeks or so, so I normally better this. I did see an online playthrough of the game where someone had a no damage run, and so they got really good at avoiding the electric ball attack, and I can do it too with a little bit more practice. So you just have to listen to the cues from the sound of electricity balls being fired off and the animation too, and it's actually quite easy to avoid once you get the hang of it. I also got rid of the recoil when you hit the boss, because even though he's outside now, so it won't cause as much as problems when you're stuck in the room, it still make it a bit easier and throw the attack patterns off too. So I think overall, I think it's a fair fight for a 4th level boss, especially given as the level itself is quite short, so you should have quite a lot of energy, and so long as you a lot of health, and so long as you get the patterns right, you can actually beat it quite easily without taking a hit. So I think it's fair overall, but let me know your opinions of the boss. And oh, before I forget, I was happy that I managed to implement a shadow and highlight effect for this boss. I realized that he was mostly made of black, and of course shadow and highlight you can make either black transparencies or white transparencies. So I managed to make the black and white transparencies for the body of the enemy when he attacks, and also some of the projectiles too, and I think the result looks pretty nice. With that, I think I've said pretty much everything I want to say about the demo, so feel free to leave me your feedback on what you think about various aspects of it, because I'll be very interested here, especially about the kind of design aspects. Now let's talk about plans for 2024. So whenever developing a game like here, I always have lots of things that I could do, like a big to-do list of little bugs to fix or things to finish off, or enemies, AIs and animations and so on. So it's all about prioritizing. For 2024, I think what I want to prioritize most of all is creating new enemy AIs, new bosses, because I'm in a good rhythm of creating these bosses and enemy AIs now. I'll create quite a few in the run up to Christmas, and now that Christmas is over, I don't have to rush through it so much. I can take my time with each enemy to get it just about perfect. Some of the ones up till the Christmas demo, I had to rush through a bit and move on to the next one before I was fully finished with the previous one. Whereas now I've got a full 12 months until the next demo, so I can really take my time with things. And of course, as and when Pyron creates the new level tile sets, I can create new levels too. So I think for 2024, although there's still lots of things I could do with the controls and the animation, there's various other things that I could fix which don't quite feel right yet. You can only do so much, and I think I really want to prioritize just getting more enemies into the game and more levels into the game. So I think that's going to be the main theme for 2024. Of course, please bear in mind that while myself and Pyron and everyone involved in a project are very passionate about it and really like working on it and willing to put a lot of effort into it, it is just a hobby, and as well as having other things in life we need to do, it's just one of many hobbies. So for example, I like to play guitar and other things too, and so there's only so much time we can devote to this each week, but we'll keep on chipping away at it and doing our best, and we hope to make some good progress next year. In terms of the channel upload schedule, I'm going to try and stick to the schedule that I talked about earlier this year. So after I'm preparing the next few days to do a video on all the amazing Mega Drive games currently in development for 2024. Then in January, I'm going to take a nice break. Then February, March, April, I'm going to produce the tutorials because I really like to share the knowledge, and I really like other people to create new games too. So I'll do tutorials on how to make Mega Drive games. And then May, June, July, August, September, I have a nice break from YouTube. So that won't be a break from actual programming. I'll still continue to program, Castlevania and Shinobi, and also maybe do a bit of research myself, a bit of learning on how to code and how to get the most out of the Mega Drive. But even though I really like having this channel and so on, I'm not a big social media guy, and I want to make sure that most of my effort spent on this hobby is spent on actually making the game rather than creating videos and so on. I want to create maybe 90% actually doing the coding and game developing, and only 10% on the social media stuff. However, just after tutorials and before I go on my summer YouTube break around the beginning of May, I will release a video just on the progress update video on the Castlevania project to let you know what I've been doing the past few months, but don't panic when I disappear in the summer. It doesn't mean I've given up on the tutorials and the Shinobi and Castlevania, it just means I'm taking my summer YouTube break. Okay, so that's about it for this video. As always, thanks very much for watching, and if you're interested in this type of content, don't forget to subscribe.
I'm interested in this.
And for those of you who wish to support the channel, I have a Patreon, and any support is much appreciated.
You won't go unrewarded.
Until next time,
farewell.